broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing daily on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome to The Gailey Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. I'm your host, John Parker. We are also streaming on our YouTube channel right now, and if you like what we're doing, subscribe, click that like button, and leave us a comment. And I want to acknowledge there's a lot happening in the news today, and coming up after us, we've got the best in progressive news and talk and analysis with the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950 Radio and Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820. But this is our weekly episode where we take a step back from the headlines. I like to call it Unpack This For Me, where we bring in an expert guest to join me and unpack a particular issue or issues facing the LGBTQ and allied community. My guest today is Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke. In 2022, when Representative Finke was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives, she became the first out trans woman elected to that chamber, the Minnesota legislature, actually, in its entirety. Since then, Representative Finke has led the Queer Legislators Caucus and now chairs the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. In the House, Representative Finke authored the state's trans refuge law, led the effort to expand the Human Rights Act to include trans people. She also helped lead the increases to HIV prevention and treatment funding. On the environment, she is a legislative leader in combating the emerald ash borer and to replant the urban forests in the Twin Cities. She successfully led the effort to protect Minnesota's wild spaces from pesticides, now a law that focuses on today and also into the future. Obviously, I could spend the rest of the hour listing all of Representative Finke's legislative accomplishments. I'll close by noting that in 2023, USA Today named her Minnesota Woman of the Year, and that same year, Children's Minnesota awarded her the Health Hero Award. Representative Finke, welcome to The Gailey Show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
All right, let's start with the election last week. Locally, the DFL retained control of the Minnesota Senate. St. Paul elected a new mayor who will be both the first woman and first Hmong American to lead the state's capital city. Minneapolis reelected Jacob Fry. The Anoka Hennepin School Board reelected all of their incumbents, which means the 3-3 ideological gridlock will continue for the next term. And then, of course, there was the nationwide elections where your party swept the board, winning elections from deep blue cities to red states such as Georgia, who hasn't elected a Democrat to statewide office since 2006 and last week elected 2. What are your thoughts on the outcomes from last Tuesday?
Well, there's a lot of outcomes. I think to start here, right? I'm in St. Paul. I was very happy for my friend and colleague, Representative Leigh Finke, who is the new mayor of our city. I'm very proud to be in a city that is fully run by women. We have an all-female city council, and now we have a woman in the mayor's seat. So it's a very exciting time. I think ideologically, Minnesota, we stayed where we were. Jacob Fry won his reelection. Leigh is a fantastic representative and will be a fantastic mayor, but ideologically is not that far removed from Melvin Carter. So we're kind of in the same position we were. We held our majority in the Senate. And it's really when you get to the national landscape where you see very important, very strong movement towards the left, a progressive movement towards electing Democrats across the board, national Democrats who are moderate, who are progressive, who are democratic socialists, Democrats in Georgia, like you said. Everywhere you looked, everywhere you measured, people moved back to Democrats, young people especially. The under 30 vote moved very dramatically back after unfortunate numbers of folks moved over to vote for Trump in the last election. So huge amount to be encouraged by. I mean, that already feels like a long time ago based on what's happened in the U.S. Senate the last 24 hours. But those elections stand. That was a great moment for our party.
Journalist Aaron Reed, who runs the excellent Aaron in the Morning news site, which if you all are not reading that, please, you can subscribe on Substack and other areas. You can follow her on all the social medias, but pointed out that anti-trans candidates and campaigns lost spectacularly last week. And there was a number, MSNBC's Jen Psaki was reporting that 56% of the advertising in the Virginia gubernatorial race from the MAGA candidate Winsome Earl Spears and PAC supporting her were anti-transgender people ads. Do you feel it is hopeful to think that MAGA will shift courses now on their political advertising and away from bashing queer and trans folks, given how, I mean, across the board, they lost spectacularly last week?
Yeah, so it was a great day, and that rebuke did happen, right? Especially in Virginia, and Abigail Spanberger won, and I watched that race fairly closely because of just the absolute torrent of anti-trans content and ads and language and rhetoric. Unfortunately, I still think the answer is no, right? I think that until a presidential election in which transgender identities and targets are lost, we will continue to see this. What we did learn, though, is that you can handle this if you are a Democratic candidate. One thing Abigail Spanberger did that was different than in the past is she actually spent millions of dollars responding to them, right? She demonstrated a pathway, and I think Mikey Sherrill did too, to a lesser extent, of saying, you're attacking me for this. I'm going to respond as a mother, as a parent, as a person who's in this community. And we don't have to allow anti-trans advocates to define our party and our candidates, right? We are not the problem, right? And when you make the case for why not only are we not a problem, we are just members of the community who want the same things everyone else wants, right? Housing, healthcare, jobs, a life free from violence, right? Food security. If you are fighting for those things, you are fighting for us. And we don't have to sit and just let these things be thrown out into the atmosphere, just letting them sort of shape the dynamic. Aaron, you mentioned Aaron Reed's reporting. I think she's right. I don't disagree with what she said, her analysis. We did see a rebuke. I do think smart state level Republicans will start to learn this, but it's going to have to build and build until a real clear anti-trans effort takes a loss. And what happened in Virginia is the first step towards that.
Mm-hmm. There are 3 now Democratic think tanks and a certain popular West Coast governor that are trying to make the case that it's either or.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, basically win and not talk about trans and queer rights, or if you talk about them, you're going to lose. Do you think last week is going to make them stop advancing this argument?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I do think what we're seeing is just a slowing down, right? You mentioned Governor Newsom, right? Governor Newsom's not just saying we shouldn't talk about it, right? He's saying, I'm not sure I agree with trans sports participation. Oh, I have questions about healthcare, right? He's moving it further into the policy space, not just the campaign and politics space. And the Democratic Party, I am an elected Democrat. The Democratic Party has welcomed transgender people into its coalition. They have protected us. We have passed laws. We have what we have as a movement in this country in terms of rights because of the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the work that I'm doing right now is working with Democrats to help them understand what it would mean for them to actually do what that question would imply, right? Because if we lose support in the Democratic Party, then just on the human rights level, we're totally screwed, right? When you said no swearing, I wanted to swear there. We cannot lose the Democratic support for the trans community. I know it could be stronger, but it's what we have. So I think we are seeing a sort of recalibration from a lot of folks in terms of what it would mean to walk away. And I'm very encouraged by that. But I always think there are people who think they are smarter than the rest of the party, right? They have gamed the system and understand that they have the answer. And for some reason, the answer is always leaving us behind. And those people they'll probably always be around.
We are talking with Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke, who represents District 66A in the Minnesota House. And I know there are people probably screaming into their radios right now about Governor Newsom because he's the darling because of the gerrymandering effort in Tuesday. But I have the receipts, folks. He zeroed out LGBTQ funding out of his budget in May, and California created policies to allow trans athletes in 2015. He became governor in 2019 and had nothing to say about it suddenly until January of 2025. So it is come at me on Blue Sky. I can give you all of their receipts there. Representative Finke, and this is a big question, and I want to continue it into our next segment. Analysts are saying, actually, no, I want to jump to this next one. I have this cognitive dissonance when folks say the Democratic Party isn't focused on kitchen table issues, because I look at what the DFL trifecta accomplished in the previous session 2 years ago. Paid parental leave, offering free college tuition for working class families, a new child care tax credit, universal school meals, expanded eligibility for Social Security tax exemption, one-time tax rebates for working class families. And then on the other side, I see tax cuts for the wealthy. I see tax increases for working class or tax increases through the tariffs for working class families. I see healthcare costs about to skyrocket because they're not going to address ACA premiums here. I see rural hospitals closing. I see a party doing everything they can to cancel SNAP benefits. Grocery prices jumped up at the highest they've ever done since 2020, this fall. What is this disconnect here? What is happening? Why do folks think that the DFL and Democrats don't care about working class issues when they are delivering on it over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, if I could answer this question, I would be a very powerful woman. But I
asked this big question, and now we're going to have to go to a break. So maybe you could start in like 20 seconds.
No.
All right. Well, let's take that break because I want to really dive into this particular issue, folks. If you like our political coverage, we will be in conversation with Minnesota House Rep Liz Ryer on November 17th, and then on November 20th, Kirk Bangstead from Wisconsin will join us to talk about his new weekly progressive political news program, his epic legal saga against Wisconsin MAGA, and his perspectives on Wisconsin's 2026 elections. And if you can't listen or watch live, we keep all of this on our YouTube channel ready for you whenever you would like to watch. You're listening to The Gailey Show. We'll be right back. To the Gailey Show. I am John Parker. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour. This is our weekly episode I like to call Unpack This For Me, where we sit down with an expert guest to take a deep dive into issues facing the LGBTQ and allied community. My guest today is Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke. Before the break, Representative, I asked a huge question listing out all of the legislative wins that Minnesota accomplished in the trifecta a couple years ago for working class families, consistently delivering on those kitchen table issues, and then a party across the aisle, MAGA, that is consistently making the situation worse for them. And yet we have this situation where people think MAGA is better on working class issues. Your thoughts on that?
I think really at the heart of it, it's a communications problem, right? I mean, especially if we think about in Minnesota, where you can see how it could go, right? I mean, I know that Minnesota went from the trifecta to a tie in the House. Mm-hmm. But really, if you think about what happened in the 2024 elections, that Minnesota maintained a Senate majority and only lost to a tie in the House. We did a very good job. We really did deliver what we promised, and the voters didn't come after us for it, right? We said we were going to help people live their lives well. We will make housing more available. We will make food security for our children just a fact, right? We said we would do this. Paid family medical leave, you can go down. You did the list. And then we communicated it. And right from the top, right? Governor Walz did a fantastic job communicating, so much so that he became part of the national ticket. Right. But nationally and even in the state, I think that there is a disconnect between what we are doing and how we are talking to people. And I try to be very honest, very direct in my communications. I think Trump has changed the way that politicians are expected to communicate, with the unfortunate side effect that he lies every single time he opens his mouth. But it doesn't seem to matter, right? He is saying the things, and people are hearing the things that we are not saying, and they are not hearing from us. And we need to close that gap. And I do think we can do that, especially in a place like Minnesota where the results are crystal clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Crystal clear. There's only one party here that is doing the work of making this the best place in America to raise your family and to live and to have a job and to retire and to receive health care. And the Republicans are trying to take all that back. There's no question about it. But we need to be more direct, honest, and less afraid of our victories. I think sometimes they don't want to take credit for what we have done. And this is politics. We got to be out there telling people what we are doing and why it's helping them.
If anything, there's no more space, it seems, for humility. It's all about being loud and in people's faces. That's part of the new rules that he set for us. Folks are saying that, what happened last week in the elections wasn't just a 2025 election. It was actually 2026 part one. I think a lot of folks want to think of it that way, given for particularly on the left, it was a resounding win. How do you see that playing out here in Minnesota next year?
I think we will see what we saw. I really do. I'm not to be overconfident. We have to work like hell to get this elections back where we want to be. We have to maintain. Governor Walz has to be reelected. The Attorney General has to be reelected. I mean, for communities like mine, states like Minnesota have to continue to win for Democrats, for the DFL, so we can continue to have our rights. But if we don't do what, I'm sorry, you froze, so I don't know if you can hear me.
I can.
Okay, great. If we don't do the work, we won't get there. But if we do the work, we've seen what it looks like, right? We have seen progressivism win. We have seen people winning across the country, like we said earlier. Minnesota is a state that is just a shade to the right of the center, to the left of the center, even on a bad day. And it's going to be a good day for us in 26. We have good candidates. We have a good message. We have a record of triumphant victories for people. I feel good.
I'm here with Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke, who represents District 66A and is a member of the DFL party. Folks in Chicago, Democratic Farmer Labor Party is what DFL stands for. So the legislative session starts in January. There's the elections in November. I know we're still a couple months out from that, but what are you expecting this session is going to look like, given that it is a tie in the House? There's a one vote advantage for the DFL in the Senate, and sometimes these sessions seem to be like everyone's setting up for what's going to happen in the election in the fall.
Yeah. So first, this year we start in February. We're on our short year, and we have a short version of our short year. I don't expect there to be a lot of policy making. Just to be honest, we do have a tie. We have two members of the House who are running for governor, two Republican members, including the Speaker, who are running for governor. We have other members running for statewide office on the Republican side. There's going to be a huge amount of politics being played. We don't have to pass a budget. Last year in the tie, we had to pass a budget, and that forced us to work together to get something done. This year, we don't have to do that. So I fully expect us to go in to make the case to the voters for what we're trying to do. Hopefully, we can move some gun violence prevention. I really hope we get a chance to vote on that in the House, but that's going to take a huge amount of work. And then we're really going to see politics taking place in advance of 2026.
Is there any on the gun violence issue? And I want to recognize, that'll all be hashed out in committees and then on the floors of the respective chambers. Is there any larger framework that you can speak to right now that the DFL is considering in terms of proposing for addressing gun violence?
No, I mean, it's what the governor put forward. The governor and our new leader, Zach Stevenson, put forward a plan an offer to the Republicans. The Republicans ignored it. That was when we were trying to get into a special session. We want to move obviously further than many of the Republicans do. But I think it would be great if we could just get a vote on this. I think if we took a vote, we would pass something. And I think that Republican leadership knows that that is true, and therefore will not allow us to get it onto the floor. And that's something I want to make sure we're repeating over and over again, because we have Republican votes for a ban on assault weapons in the state of Minnesota. And those folks should be allowed a chance to vote for their constituents.
I don't want to ask a huge question and then go into a break again. So we are going to take another break. If you like what you're seeing, click subscribe on YouTube, give us a like and leave a comment. And if you're listening to us on the radio, none of this is possible without our generous advertisers and sponsors. Please do business with them. If the restaurant, go in and eat there. If they are selling you something, go and buy from them, or just tell them on social media that you thank them for supporting independent progressive radio. Tell them you heard about them on The Gailey Show on AM 950 Radio, KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. And you can continue the conversation on our Blue Sky. We are at thegaileyshow.org on Blue Sky. We will be back after this short break. Of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. I am your host, John Parker. You are listening to The Gailey Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. It is 33 minutes after the hour. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel right now, please subscribe, click like, and leave us a comment. It is our weekly Unpack This For Me episode. This is when an expert guest joins us to unpack particular issues affecting the LGBTQ and allied community. Today, I am very lucky to say that our guest is Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke. In 2022, when Representative Finke was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives, she became the first out trans woman elected to the state legislature. Since then, she has led the Queer Legislators Caucus and now chairs the Reproductive Freedom Caucus and has authored numerous laws related to the state's trans refuge law, expanding the Human Rights Act to include trans people, working on environmental issues such as the emerald ash borer and use of pesticides in Minnesota's wild spaces. Representative Finke, can we talk about the Trump administration? It has been an everywhere, everything, all at once situation from them through executive orders and then through clawing back funding through various agencies and then the policies that those agencies are doing. It's been hard for LGBTQ journalists and, news and culture programs like mine just to keep up. It seems like every day there's something else to try and cover. We're coming up now on the end of 2025. I mean, as we look back at the year, what are your thoughts on the impact all of this has had on Minnesota's LGBTQ community?
It has been worse than I think that people were prepared for, right? And people were prepared for it to be bad. Gratefully, Minnesota has not just a strong legal protection landscape and the strongest Human Rights Act in the country, but we have leaders who are standing strong, and we have healthcare providers who are standing strong, and I think we are weathering it about as well as anyone, which is not saying much given that Trump and his government are really doing every single thing that they can to eliminate transgender rights entirely, if not transgender people, and just spread the damage outward from there to the entire LGBTQ community.
There was a New York Times Ipsos poll earlier this year that said only X percent, it was like 3 or 4% of the country cares about LGBTQ rights. And this means the Democrats are out of touch because they're so obsessed with LGBTQ rights. They need to stop talking about it and focus on working class issues. Last week, exit polls showed that LGBTQ issues were not the primary driver of voters' decisions in the Virginia and the New Jersey races. And yet I don't hear anything saying that MAGA and Trump need to get off all of these LGBTQ issues. And again, I feel like there's this cognitive dissonance where we have one party who is just relentlessly spending all of their time on us. You know, even right now in Florida and Texas, they're going after rainbow crosswalks and they're making that the big issue, wasting everybody's time when they could be talking about healthcare. They could be talking about economics. They could talk about grocery prices. How is that playing out though here locally with our GOP and MAGA? I mean, are they also as obsessed with legislating us out of existence?
Yes, they are. MAGA here in Minnesota is as strong as it is anywhere in the country, and folks should not pretend like that is not the case. I've got plenty of emails if people need receipts. But I think what's important about what you said, and this is happening here in Minnesota too, right, is the data has always been clear that people don't care that much about trans rights. What is happening is that Republicans have convinced voters that Democrats are obsessed with LGBTQ people, especially trans people. They don't think it matters. They think it's all that matters to us. And that is an incredible sleight of hand that they have done, right? Because I know as a trans legislator, I would never talk about my community again at work if I could. We have protections and we're ready to move on. But they have tricked the narrative. They have turned it on its head so that we are the obsessive ones for trying to defend ourselves and our lives. And in Minnesota, you have that same exact thing playing out. You have the Speaker of the House and the leader, the floor leader, and others over there saying the number one thing we're doing when we get back into session is taking care of girls' sports, right? Protecting girls from sports, protecting girls in the bathrooms. These same absolutely outdated, wrong arguments that have no impact on the lives of people who are living in the state of Minnesota, who are struggling economically with affordability, who are finding homes being further and further out of reach. These are not things that anybody's doing, but they are the ones who are teeing it up as the most important issue going into the next session.
And as you said earlier, it's very interesting to see all of the candidates who won last Tuesday, particularly in the gubernatorial candidates, Governor-elect Sherrill in New Jersey, Governor-elect Spanberger in Virginia, and New York Mayor-elect Mamdani, who actually said we are going to protect trans rights in his speech, in his acceptance speech on Tuesday night, that they are providing the pathway forward of how to talk about this because, you know, as we talked earlier, there were some folks that don't want us to talk about queer folks at all going into next year. Something that we have that not every state has is a Supreme Court that is more balanced, shall we say, as evidenced by they just delivered last month a unanimous and sweeping ruling that says that the Minnesota Human Rights Act prohibits discrimination against trans folks in places of public accommodation. That was a huge win.
Yeah, a big win, and a reminder of what the law is here, right? And actually, not to correct, but back at the beginning of this episode, you mentioned that I had updated the Human Rights Act to include transgender people, and that's not actually true. The Minnesota Human Rights Act has protected transgender people since 1993. In 2023, what we did was update the definition and expand those protections to housing and a few other areas. But gender identity has actually been protected since 1993, and our state law protecting trans athletes goes back to 2015, like California. It's just the law here, right? And it has never been a problem. Trans kids playing sports goes back decades. And it's not a problem until one of our political parties decided to lie about it and make it a national crisis that we must continue to fight about all the time. And all that the Supreme Court said was the Minnesota Human Rights Act protects this, right? This is a right that people have. They have had it. They continue to have it.
Should we turn to speaking of Supreme Courts, the U.S. Supreme Court it's just nonstop from them. How do we, the effects of them, what has that been like here in Minnesota? And they're also just flood of decisions that they've been ruling on.
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court is somehow even more dangerous than the MAGA administration that we have. They had the healthcare ruling last year, Skermeti. This year they have a conversion therapy ban in front of them. They just decided not to rule on gay marriage equality, but I think they're actually just waiting to do that at a future session, maybe in a year or two. And then in the meantime, we get these smaller kind of shadow docket decisions. Last week we had one on the passport ruling that said that the Trump administration can put their passport restriction policy in place while it plays out in court. This is extremely damaging to people everywhere, including in Minnesota. We can't do anything about things like the TSA or the passport, Social Security Administration. That's outside of our ability to protect people from.
Mm-hmm.
And folks are really nervous, as they should be. People are going to have their passports expiring in the next couple of years. Lots of trans people who got them at the beginning of the first Trump administration. Large numbers of passports will be expiring in 26 and 27 because of that. And we don't really have a clear pathway forward. We are going to have to see what this means. I advise people to have a passport that allows them to travel. Regardless of what letter it has on it. We are not defined by the government or the Trump administration, but being able to travel is something that we should be prepared for, just as an aside. But we should expect more from the Supreme Court. They're coming for us, and we are going to have to protect ourselves. We're going to have to protect each other because they are not going to do it.
My guest this hour is Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke, who represents District 66A. Representative Finke, it's my editorial opinion that the only way that we can fix the Supreme Court is to add justices, that whomever the next president is going to have to add justices, particularly as they are making judicious use of the shadow docket, which is giving the right wing and MAGA whatever they want, particularly Trump, without having any oral arguments, without writing any decisions, and then just saying, this is now the law, here you go. And then lower courts are like, well, what do we even do with this? I'm not asking you to commit to a position here, but how do we, short of that, like, what do we need to do here? Because if we don't do something about the Supreme Court, we're going to lose an entire generation of rights here. It's going to take forever to get anything back.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at a generational fight, especially for the rights we will lose in my community. Trans people all over the country have been living in positions where their rights, there are more trans people in Texas under the laws of Texas than there are in the entire upper Midwest, right? Trans people are everywhere. They're thriving, they're living, they're surviving. And the rest of us are going to be in those positions for a while. What we should do about the Supreme Court, I know that we as a party need to get back in power, and then we need to have steel our courage to do something big, right? Adding judges to the court would be a real big move. It's going to take a lot of courage. Whether or not that's ever going to be a question that we can answer, I'm a state representative. It's out of my hands. But we need bold action. I will tell you that. We need leaders who are not afraid to say and do what we need to do to keep people alive, right? Last week, Donald Trump was flirting with, let's just starve Americans, right? Like, this is the stakes that he's in. Like, I will starve these people in order to continue to distract the conversation from whatever it is that he wants to distract us from that day. Usually the Epstein files. He will do anything for power. And we will need to be able to respond with courage and resolve.
I feel, I don't know if this is an apples to apples comparison, but gerrymandering, I feel like the National Democratic Party has said, "Oh, it's wrong, it's wrong. We're not going to do it. It's wrong, it's wrong." Have made very paltry efforts to try to stop it from happening, and now are finding themselves in a situation where they're racing to catch up here. And we see what voters in California did around, like, okay, fine, let's get rid of these seats if Texas is going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel it's the same thing with Supreme Court reform, where it's been, oh, no, 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 we can't, we shouldn't, we can't, no, don't do that. Like, it's too big. And then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where it's like whoever the next Democratic president is, ideally in 2029, that court is going to continue doing what it's doing. And it's going to stop everything when the Texas AG, whoever it is, just runs things up through the Fifth Circuit and gets to them as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's right. And part of the difficulty of what Democrats are facing, with the gerrymandering and these other sort of norms issues, right? Like, we have rules and we have norms, but the moment somebody stops playing by them, they're gone. They mean nothing, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything that we have always tried to play fair, because the minute the other side walks away from it, like, you're powerless. And we are trying to dig ourselves out of that, and it's taking a long time, and we just have to stick to it.
I have to fit in one more break, but we're going to have more with Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke when we come back. Before we take that break, check out our GLAAD Media Award nominated podcast, This Queer Book Saved My Life. I interview LGBTQ guests from across the rainbow about the queer books that had a life-saving impact for them. Plus, we bring in the authors to join the conversations. This Queer Book Saved My Life is available everywhere you stream your podcasts and at thisqueerbook.com. Stay tuned. More after the break. Welcome back to the Gailey Show. I am John Parker. We are coming up on the top of the hour. It is our weekly Unpack This For Me episode. My guest is Minnesota House Representative Leigh Finke. Representative Finke, I saw on your bio that you have a Master of Arts in Shakespeare from DePaul University. And once upon a time, I was in the theater and studied Shakespeare twice in Oxford with the British American Drama Academy, not Oxford University. So when I saw that, I was like, I can't not ask you a Shakespeare question. And I guess the one that I would ask you is, of all of his 30 plus plays, what do you think is the most relevant to what we're dealing with today? Is it Macbeth? Is it King Lear? I'm kind of hoping it's Lear, but which one do you think it would be that we can learn from?
It's a great question, and it's funny that you name those two, because I just went back and watched my favorite versions of those.
Oh, really?
Plays, yeah, the films in the last maybe in the last 6 weeks or so. I mean, those are the two that jump out, right? Like, the idea here of the tragedy that we are in the hubris and the power craving behavior. I mean, they have a lot to offer. They have a lot to offer. But a lot of the histories as well. Henry IV, 1 and 2, I think show a lot of. They relate not because we are in that moment, but they show us something about politics and power that I think is really relevant right now, and the groveling nature of what it means to be in these spaces. But Macbeth and Lear are really the two, and
we got some Richard III.
Yeah,
some Richard III going on here.
Yeah, I mean, Richard III is just not a favorite of mine, so I kind of also, I don't have anything against it, but it's not. I don't love it like I love.
Not even the Sir Ian McKellen version.
I mean, no, I mean, it's great. It's fine. So, but when I think about the great ones about this kind of, Richard III is much more like a character study to me, and less of a let's extrapolate this out into a political landscape. Like, Lear draws such a world. Same with Macbeth. There's such a visceral feeling of being in this political system of just like abject terror.
Mm-hmm. Well, then I gotta know, what are your favorite versions of Macbeth and King Lear for our listeners and viewers to check out?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Scotland, PA, right? The kind of comedy version, but inside of a fast food restaurant. But my favorite one is actually probably the more recent one by Robert Eggers, who did The Witch. It's really just really spoke to me, and I loved that Macbeth. And then yeah, Lear. I mean, Lear is the Kurosawa version, Ran, Ran, the Japanese film.
Oh,
That's like one of the all-time great Shakespeare adaptations. I absolutely adore it.
oh, I love that. I haven't seen either one of those, so I'll have to add that to the list. As we wrap up our time here, we've got about 4 minutes left. What message would you want to say to the Minnesota LGBTQ community?
You know, I would tell people what I have been saying all along, right? Which is that there is immense power in our community, right? There is political power, but there is also social, emotional, community organizing power. We are a presence in the state, and we do not need any meaning to be provided to us from these people who are trying to destroy us. You cannot actually eradicate people who are queer, right? We are forever here, and we are never going to stop fighting, right? And we have allies in our highest level of government here in Minnesota. And, you know, Minnesota is the only state that has not seen any of our providers stop providing gender affirming care to minors. And there is a reason that that is true. And it is because of what we have done as a community, and in the legislature and in the governor's office. And we are going to continue to do that going forward, even if we take losses. We have so much power here, and we're going to continue to wield it.
I think that's very interesting about the healthcare. We have a partnership with Windy City Times in Chicago, and they found that no major healthcare provider offers healthcare anymore to trans youth because of the threat of having their federal funding taken away. And I think of all of the families that are moving specifically to what they think is a blue city in a blue state, and they're going to get there and not have the care that they need.
Yeah. And it's tragic. And states around the country are making decisions they should never be faced with. And we will, to be clear, and I mean, not to bring us down at the end, but we will face those decisions. But up until this moment, everyone has faced them and decided it is worth it to provide this care. And as long as that is true, that will be true as long as we can keep it.
Well, I love the example of the out lesbian Michigan Attorney General who put all of the healthcare systems in Michigan on notice and said, look, folks, availability of federal funding does not determine whether or not you comply with our human rights laws here in the state. And I would hope, fingers crossed, that if we come to that juncture, Attorney General Ellison will do the same. Representative Finke, this has been such a delight to have you here. I know you're very busy, and to give us this much time has just been absolutely, I needed this conversation. It adds to the wins from last week. How can folks connect with you if they want to do so? I know you have a newsletter and you have a website as well.
Yeah, I'm online. You know, you can find me on Instagram. That's mostly where I hang out on the socials, but I have a website where you can get on our newsletter, leighforminnesota.com. Also, my official side newsletter. If you go to the House of Representatives website, you can sign up for my newsletter there. I do a lot of communicating that way. I do town halls. I'm around. So just hit me up.
Thank you again for your time. And thank you everyone for listening and or watching today. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, click that like button. Up next on WCPTA 20 is Choose Views with Richard Chu. For folks in Minneapolis, it is the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950 Radio. Stay tuned after that for Native Roots Radio. And then Step into the Unknown with Greg Bakken at 10 p.m. Central on Ghost Box Radio. You can stream our show everywhere you get your podcasts. And until this time tomorrow, keep it queer, America.